Okay, we're live. Okay, we are live. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy on February 6th. And we are switching topics from our previous discussion. We were just in a joint hearing with Transportation, Senate Transportation, around the clean cars and trucks rules. And so now we're switching gears to talk about energy burden. And there's this report from Efficiency Vermont that is maybe, well, you'll tell us all about it, but I think it's very relevant to the work that we're going to be doing. So we have Kelly Lucci here with us from Efficiency Vermont to tell us about this energy burden report. This is your first time with us, yes, Kelly? I think it is.
Yes, this session. Yep.
Okay, this session, fair enough. So I think we should probably start with a quick round of introductions, and then I'll turn it over to you to walk us through this.
Perfect. You want me to go first and then hand it over to you, or?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. I'm Kelly Lucci, Director of Strategy and Partnerships for Efficiency Vermont, and one of the authors of the Vermont Energy Burden Report.
Right. Ruth, are you good to go?
I'm sorry, I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
Senator Jerry Williams from Rutland District.
And Watson from the Washington District.
Seth Baumgarst from the Bennington District. Scott McCalvary.
And you know you. Right. All right. Great. All right. Go ahead.
Perfect. Very nice to meet you all, and thank you for inviting me to talk about our paper. We are really pleased to be able to share what we've learned and also share, limitations and questions still to be answered. I do have a slide deck, so if you'll permit me to just take a minute here and get that projecting for you. Okay, is that visible?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna just walk through the deck, but obviously feel free to interrupt at any time if you have questions, if I can clarify anything, and happy to have a broader discussion afterwards as well. So just a quick refresher on who Efficiency Vermont is and what we do. We are Vermont's largest energy efficiency utility. We serve the entire state with electric efficiency programs, except for Burlington, where Burlington Electric Department does a great job serving their community. And we offer thermal efficiency programs for all areas of the state except those served by Vermont Gas, who operate their own efficiency utility as well. Our focus is on helping Vermonters lower their energy costs and transition to lower carbon energy use where appropriate, where it makes sense and fits their goals, and also supporting the broader ecosystem of energy implementation in the state. So a whole range of contractors, distributors, all of those folks, businesses that are involved in helping people install cleaner, more efficient, lower cost technologies. I just, again, just a little bit more context. So we operate on a performance-based contract. We are overseen by the State Public Utility Commission and the Public Service Department. I want to just touch on this briefly here, but we have about 25 different requirements that we're expected to meet in service to that broader performance contract. Those are across our electric and our thermal programs. And just so you can have a quick snapshot, I took in this sort of ring chart here, the kind of major metrics we are measured against on the electric side. So you can see their relative weighting. So the largest weight is given to total resource benefits. So that is savings on things like electric usage, water usage, resource savings, and megawatt hour reduction. And then you can see the other metrics are relatively lower weight, things like reducing summer peak, winter peak, and greenhouse gas reduction. In addition, and this is relevant to the energy burden report, we do have minimum requirements for cost savings delivered for every county in the state. So we report on and measure against those as well on an annual basis, and we work off of targets that are set by our regulators over the course of 3-year performance periods. We are currently just starting the second year of this current 2024 through 2026 performance period. Okay, so with that, I'm going to just jump right into the energy burden report. This is the third iteration of this report. The first one we put forward was in 2016, second one in 2019, and then the most recent version in 2023. We've changed our methodology slightly over the course of those years, but generally, the trends are are holding, and it's been a useful opportunity for us to kind of update that regularly and see where we're noticing differences. So what is energy burden? Energy burden, quite simply, is a calculation of a household's overall spending on energy in the context of their income. So you take an estimate of energy spending across, in this case, we do it across a range of 3 different categories. We look at median household income, and then we are able to make an estimate of what energy burden looks like for that home or for that community. So I mentioned we've got 3 components of energy usage that we look at in this report. Those are end uses across electric, thermal, and transportation. And there are other states, other areas where energy burden is looked at on a regular basis. I will note that we're somewhat unique in Vermont in that we incorporate transportation. That is not something that is routinely included when we're looking at an energy burden, but we felt like it's really important in Vermont given the rural nature of the state and the impact of transportation costs. So we wanted to, we have included that in every iteration of this report. I'm walking through today.
Quick question, make sure I understand this.
Yep.
When, on our transportation spending, is that fuel or is that all costs associated with transportation?
That's a great clarifying question. So we only look at the costs of the fuels for each of these categories.
Okay.
Yep, we don't look at all of the other associated costs. And I did want to name, I'm just sort of touching on highlights of the report here today, but we do have a easy to access website. You can see everything there, and you can actually dive in with some interactive maps at the community level or at the census block level if you're interested in learning more. So that can be found at efficiencyvermont.com/energy burden. High level in Vermont, and I mentioned the fact that we include transportation being somewhat unique because it is important if we want to benchmark against other states. But high level in Vermont, when you look at all 3 of these categories, we estimate an average energy burden across the state of about 11%. Now, if you want to compare how Vermont stands against other states where they have looked at energy burden, we can remove transportation costs to give you kind of a general sense of that, more apples to apples. And we come in at about 5% when we're just considering electricity and thermal energy costs. Across the nation, the general benchmark is that you'd consider combined electric and thermal costs at 6% or higher as high, in comparison to other states. So we're right on the edge. If you're kind of wondering how we compare. When we did this report in 2023, we leveraged data because you have to kind of wait a couple of years till data is readily available. We leveraged data from 2017 through 2021. You'll note that that's a really interesting range of years. And of course encompasses the first couple of years of the pandemic, which had pretty wide-ranging impacts. And so in this report, we did name that because obviously you want to be careful when you're looking at trend lines to recognize when you have worldwide catastrophic events that might have an impact. There was notable shifts over this last period in median income across the state. We did not have, we weren't able to dive in and understand any discernible patterns, but I do want to name this. If you look at this map, you can see the darker areas in the state, the darker colored towns generally experienced decreases of 10% or more in their median income. But the very light colored communities that show up on this map saw more than 50% increases in their household median income. Now, I want to name this because if you think about the equation where we calculate energy burden, the denominator is median household income. So that obviously is a huge factor in understanding energy burden at a local level. You know, changes in income can have a huge impact.
Okay, Kelly, we have a couple questions in the room.
Hey Kelly, just clarify, are these percent change in household income, are these inflation adjusted or no?
These were not.
Okay, thank you.
And another question from Senator Hardy.
So this is just about the change in income, but it doesn't. Do you have a similar map about the absolute or the value of the income or the actual amount, average income?
I didn't produce a similar map, but we do have the data, you know, that we could share. It's a little, at this point, it's a little bit out of date, but I just always want to share this as context because it is a driver of some of the outputs that we come out with related to energy burden.
Right, but if you have a 10% decrease of a really high income level, that's less concerning than a 10% decrease of a really low income level.
Yep, that's a great point. Okay, any other questions? It's hard for me to see you in the room, so thank you,
Okay.
Chair, for letting me know when questions come up.
No problem, I'll keep doing that. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay, so having shared all of that background, jumping into some of the high-level outputs of our report. So if you look on the left side of the screen, you can see total energy burden estimated at the town level for all of the towns across Vermont where there are more than 50 households that showed up. On the right side, you can see the annual amount spent on energy across those three categories. So this is our estimate, so it would be an average at a town level. So generally, you know, what I always call out when I'm holding up these two maps next to each other is, you know, you see for sure on the burden side, a pocket, a significant pocket in the northwestern part of the state where we estimate town level energy burden to be relatively low compared to the rest of the state. When you look towards the Northeast Kingdom, that's where we tend to see some of the more highly energy burden communities based on this report. And then you can see on the right side, as I said, the sort of spending estimates that went into this. It's important to note that, you know, we generally saw higher variations in spending across communities when we were looking at the categories of transportation spending and thermal spending. Electricity spending tended to have less variation. When you look at the variation across total energy costs, you know, some of the lowest spending communities were about $4,000 annually, whereas the higher spending communities were generally, you know, nearly or slightly more than double that, around $8,000 a year. Okay, next slide. So again, just to give, just to put some names on some of the communities on the map, this is the list of all of the communities where we estimated a total energy burden of more than 15%, which would be a high energy burden. And you can see the bottom line in the chart gives you the statewide average, just as a comparison. Important to note, as I named it before, many of these communities are in the Northeast Kingdom. And we see transportation being a significant driver. You know, as I noted, that's the highest spending category we estimate. Okay. I did just want to name, I referenced it before on the efficiencyvermont.com/energy burden website. We do have an additional level of analysis we included for this iteration of the report because we felt that was important, where we actually estimated burden at the census block level. And this is important because if you think about communities with relatively low populations versus communities with much higher populations, if you're just taking an average across those communities, it can really obscure pretty significant and important variations in higher population communities. So up on the screen, I just want to give an example of that. When we zoom in on Barrie, you can see, just looking at it at a town level, the output kind of belies some of the variation that shows up when you look on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can see this at a census block level. And indeed, Barrie had some of the highest energy burden block groups in the state when we zoomed in at that level. So all of this is interactive, and if you want to zoom in on your communities, I'd encourage you to visit that website because it really does give another a flavor to the results that can be helpful. So I'm just going to walk through each of the energy categories so you can get a sense of where there are variations and patterns on that side. So again, on the screen, we've got total electricity burden on the left side and annual electricity spending on the right side. And you can see on the spending side, we've got some interesting pockets of relatively higher electric spending. Particularly you look at some areas in Addison County, Northern Bennington County, some parts of Franklin County as well. And I always get asked what we think the driver of that spending is. There could be a range of factors, but one that I am always careful to note is if you're a farmer, you have the ability to choose what electric rate you are working off of from your utility. So we work off of residential electric rates, but if, for example, somebody is a farmer and they have chosen a residential rate, that may be a driver of significantly higher electricity spending that isn't really going to be apparent in sort of the output that we're getting from their electric utility as we estimate spending and look at usage of various communities.
Another question in the room.
Yep.
Much of this data comes from the smart meters. Do you know what percentage of residences don't have the smart meters?
I think you'd probably have to ask the utilities, what their relative deployment looks like. I think the vast majority of the state at this point has made that conversion. We get sort of a data output from the electric utilities as part of our ongoing collaboration with them to serve people, with efficiency programs. So we kind of are on the other side of that. I wouldn't want to speak to what that infrastructure deployment looks like across sort of different utilities.
Thank you.
And there's another question in the room. Go ahead.
Kelly, just to make sure I just put a clarity on the point you were making about the higher spending in my county and Addison County. Is it because you're speculating that farmers are choosing the residential rate, but their electric usage is actually for the farm, and so it's getting counted as residential usage when it's actually farm usage?
Correct. Yeah, that's one of our, we think that might be one of the drivers here, but it'd be hard to disaggregate that without kind of zooming in at the level of each account, which is sort of beyond the scope of this report.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you. Carry on.
Great, thank you. So again, though, generally, if you look on the electricity burden side of the map, we can see a generally similar pattern that we saw when we looked at total energy burden, which is pockets of a significant pocket in northwestern Vermont that generally has lower electricity burden than other areas of the state. When we move on to the thermal side, again, thermal burden is on the left, annual amount spent the right, we see a similar pattern. I do want to name, particularly on the thermal side, a few drivers of that lower burden. One is, you can see along the Vermont gas pipeline, natural gas is a relatively lower cost heating fuel, so that can be a driver of lower burdens in those counties. And also, as noted earlier, income is a significant defining factor when you're trying to determine energy burden. So you'll see we do have, again, higher burdens in the Northeast Kingdom, although there are, on the thermal side, higher burden communities spread more throughout the state. And important to note, particularly for this category, we don't believe that higher usage of thermal energy is necessarily a driver of burden being higher. Most of the communities where we saw higher thermal burden had, usage that was at or below state average for thermal costs. And many of these areas, have a higher prevalence of wood heat, which is again a relatively lower heating fuel. Okay. And closing out the energy categories with transportation burden, again, burden on the left, annual amount spent estimated on the right. In this category, we see a particular variation that is driven by lower burden and the northwestern part of the state, and an even more stark concentration of transportation energy burden in Northeast Kingdom communities. When we do this analysis, we use census estimates of vehicle miles traveled, and so fairly obvious reasons why more rural areas of the state are likely to have higher transportation energy burden and costs. They have to drive further to do what they need to do. Okay, so that's sort of the high level energy burden information. The estimates that we have throughout the state. I want to speak a little bit to some additional analysis we did in this report around strategies for alleviating energy burden and sort of their relative prevalence across Vermont communities, because one of the natural questions we ask ourselves is, okay, if we have a sense that energy burdens are higher in certain parts of the state, are we doing everything that we can as energy program implementers to help connect folks in those communities with technologies that can reduce their energy burden? So I want to do a quick level set on just some of the projects that are most likely to result in a reduction in energy burden based on average home usage, average income, kind of taking that baseline across the entire state. And one thing you'll note, we have sort of 4 different projects called out here. These are all relatively high upfront cost. But when we went through our report, there is actually an appendix where you can dig in and see a little bit more around this analysis and a broader list of steps that somebody could take to reduce their energy burden. As you can see, the relative impact that would have. These happen to be the ones that were sort of at the highest potential to reduce energy burden, depending on where somebody's starting from and what their usage looks like. Okay, so thematically, what we're realizing here is it costs money upfront to reduce your energy burden. The other thing I want to name, because that prior slide could give you the impression that in all cases, if you change your if you change energy to electricity, it's going to always have an impact to reduce your energy burden. And that's not always the case. It's important, I think, for those of us operating energy programs to name that and to make sure that we're putting in place sort of services and systems that allow us to really engage with customers at an individual level and help them understand the implications of decisions they might make. So, electricity is not always going to be the lowest cost option. Often it is, but not always. You think about a customer on the Vermont gas pipeline. They are probably going to have lower costs if they leverage, their existing infrastructure rather than relying on a heat pump for most of the winter to heat. But they might want to install a heat pump because there are other benefits from their perspective. So again, important to, I think, work with customers on an individual basis, understand their specific scenarios, and make sure they understand the implications of the choices they might make on their overall cost picture. The table on this slide also just calls out one trend that was interesting. For the iteration of this report we did in 2019, we saw a reductions in electricity usage across all counties of the state. When we did this report in 2023, residential electric usage actually increased in all counties of the state. We will be keeping an eye on this for our next iteration to understand, are we seeing the beginnings of a trend that is, longer standing and a result of people choosing to electrify heating, transportation, and other end uses. But it was interesting to us to see this trend come out so starkly from our prior report, where again we'd seen reductions across most all counties in the state. Okay, so another way to look at this and understand, are we meeting the needs of customers who are looking to reduce their energy burden? We do operate the statewide point of sale cold climate heat pump program. We do this in partnership with Vermont's electric utilities because it serves their goals under Tier 3. And it serves the goals of Efficiency Vermont as an EEU. So if you look at that data in terms of where we're seeing installation of cold climate heat pumps on the right, and then you compare that to our sort of estimates of where energy or thermal burden are the highest, you can see there's actually not very great alignment in terms of where people are taking advantage of this technology and where folks have higher thermal burden. So that's an important learning for us as we think about how to improve programs and make sure people are accessing them who can most benefit from the opportunity to reduce their thermal burden.
Kelly, can I interrupt you? I think so this graph of participation in installations of cold climate heat pumps is I think it's very telling, and I want to make a connection here that I think is true, but I want to check with you about this. When somebody gets a cold climate heat pump, does Efficiency Vermont have some kind of incentive to make that cheaper?
Yes, we do, as do electric utilities. So there is as I said, we operate a statewide program. So we work at the point of sale with distributors throughout the state. So effectively, when a contractor goes to a distributor and purchases a cold climate heat pump to install in somebody's home, there is a discount that is already taken off of that heat pump. We only apply this to the most efficient models and to those models that are going to be most effective in Vermont's cold climate, because as you may be aware, there are a number of heat pump models, and that is not the case for all of them, right? From our perspective, as an electric efficiency utility, we want to make sure we are connecting folks with models that are as efficient as possible and are going to meet their needs, whether that be heating or cooling. So at point of sale, there is a discount applied that comes from Efficiency Vermont's budget to capture those electric efficiency savings. And then we process an additional discount from electric utilities throughout the state who are looking to meet their Tier 3 requirements. So it comes out as one discount at point of sale. And then electric utilities and Efficiency Vermont can offer additional incentives that folks can apply for after the fact, particularly if they are low or moderate income, to help offset the cost further. But there's that sort of consistent statewide point of sale discount that applies for all those programs.
Right. So I guess the thing that strikes me about these two different maps is is that the folks who perhaps could use it the most are the not necessarily lined up with the ones who are in fact taking advantage of the discounts in the current frame, in the current structure. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that was very striking to us as we were putting this report
Okay,
together
I
as
just
well.
wanted to make sure that, like, this is something that's something that I see when I look at these two maps. So I want excuse me, just wanted to verify that that is what you were seeing as well. And there's another question there.
Just a quick question, the data is pretty outdated. Because it only goes through 21, do you know the trends are headed?
In terms of the installations of cold climate heat pumps?
Well, for instance, yeah.
Yeah, so we do have some more up-to-date data around installations. I'd be happy to pull and share. I think the trend lines have generally continued. In terms of updating the thermal burden estimates and that data, I would expect it won't be till about 2026 before we put out another report and use more up-to-date data then.
Okay, so that probably hasn't changed, but in terms of the installation of heat pumps for cold climate heat pumps, you're seeing the same trend in the same areas, just increasing is really what.
Yeah, I haven't updated this exact map. I would say generally, I think the trends hold, although if you wanted me to pull and provide an updated map, I could certainly do that because I don't have like a side-by-side that we've updated, for example, with our 2024 data.
We do also have Peter Walk, this from Efficiency Vermont. Do you have something you want to say about this?
Yes, for the record, Peter Walk, Managing Director of Business Vermont. Kelly, it's a great presentation. I just wanted to add that it's important to note that while we talk about statewide programs, they are primarily passive programs, right? They are designed for people who are interested to be able to save money. If we are going to continue to do this work and help for all Vermonters transition, we need to be more active in our approach across the board as a state. We are simply following your direction in achieving the most cost-effective savings, and we need to address that.
Yes, thank you. And there's I think another couple of questions in the room. Go ahead, Sam.
So in my district, I know there's a lot of solar on homes and a lot of brownfield solar fields. And we don't have natural gas in all Bruce district stopped it in Little Bear, so.
The power of
I think
it.
it's just a matter of, savings. And we've got a real, good bunch of solar installers and,
Cool, thank you. Was there, Senator, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just say, I think, there's probably an income layer here, there might be even a political layer here, but the bigger layer might even be is the age of housing stock.
Mm-hmm.
Old
That'd be interesting.
stock is way harder to put this stuff into than stuff that's new construction or recent construction.
It's a great point.
It absolutely is, and all the more important because older homes, really, we want to get to a scenario where those homes are weatherized prior to the installation of electrified heating, because bottom line, like that's going to reduce your cost no matter what fuel source you're using.
And that is one of the questions. Oh, okay, never mind. Great, I think we're good to move on. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So again, just another way to kind of slice this data, I wanted to share the communities in the state with a thermal energy burden in excess of 5%, and just give you a sense of how the adoption rate of cold climate heat pumps and weatherization in those communities compares to the statewide average. And you can see, generally, across the state, we've got about, just under 14% of homes weatherized. And if you look at these communities where there is a relatively high thermal energy burden, we only see one of them that comes in above that statewide average. And similarly, on the adoption of heat pumps, none of them come in above what we estimate to be the statewide average in terms of adoption rate.
Brattleboro does.
On the
That's weatherization.
Adoption.
on weatherization, yes, but not on cold climate heat pumps.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yep. And did something similar on the transportation side, just to give kind of a guesstimate of EV adoption. And again, all of these communities are significantly below the statewide average in terms of per capita adoption. Okay, so I'm almost through my deck, but I did just want to.
Oh, sure,
On
yeah.
the EV adoption rate, did you look at a map of where the charging infrastructure is for those communities? It potentially could be also related to that.
That's a great point. And at the time, we did not take into account charging infrastructure. Part of that would be, as we're looking at this, we're really kind of limiting to the household. So there's an assumption that, we're looking at, your burden based on what your usage is at home, which would be impacted by at-home charging, but not by charging offsite. Okay. So last couple of slides here, I just wanted to speak to the fact that, energy burden is one way to look at accessibility of programs and sort of equity and what we're doing to serve folks across the state. But it is not the only lens that we should look at. And so I just wanted to share a couple examples of some learnings that we have gained and worked to act on over the course of the last few years. We have a pretty robust community engagement program where we, have staff who are dedicated to reaching out, going to events, building relationships with partners, and really just generally trying to help increase participation in Efficiency Vermont's programs. And we really try to make sure that engagement is a two-way process. So where we're hearing, hey, we're not participating in this program because it's not working for us for these reasons, we want to bring that back and try to make changes in our program design wherever possible. So just one example on the residential side, we offer an appliance voucher program. So effectively for qualifying customers, we allow them to leverage a voucher from Efficiency Vermont. They can take that to a local retailer and get effectively a free appliance across a range of categories. It's a great program. It creates flexibility. It gives the customer the ability to kind of make their own choice around what they need and what can help reduce their costs. And we make sure that the appliances are the most efficient they can be. As we have circulated and increased participation in this program, we got some feedback from renters in particular that it was really hard for them to participate because frequently it was hard for them to get permission from the property owner, and they didn't always own their appliances. But as we dug in, we realized there were actually a fair number of renters who did have appliances they owned. Categories like window air conditioners, dehumidifiers, even in some cases, things like refrigerators, where they actually had ownership. And so we changed the design of the program to make it easier for them to participate. And we used to qualify for this program based on energy burden. So we would sort of look at somebody's electricity costs, we would look at their income, and we would say, okay, if you're highly energy burdened, this is how you qualify for a voucher. But what we realized really digging into the data and individual customer situations is that there were a lot of folks whose electricity usage was still relatively low, even though their income was low. And that meant that they were not qualifying for a program that could really be beneficial to them. So this is a situation where, energy burden is not the lens we want to apply in all cases. And we actually have shifted this program so the qualification is based solely on income, and in doing so have created a lot more opportunities for folks to participate than existed before.
So Kelly, there's a question in the room.
Hey Kelly, does the appliance voucher, does that have to be, is that only on an in-state purchase? Or can it be out of state?
I believe that it needs to be in-state because we have agreements with those participating retailers that allows somebody to sort of pay with the voucher. I could dig in with the team and understand a little bit more around where there might be flexibility around that if helpful.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, there's whole areas of the state where there are no appliance people that sell appliances.
Yeah. We do significant outreach in some of those areas to try to make sure that there's good, as good coverage as can be. And, this does apply to retailers, to some of the larger, like big box retailers in the state too. We have relationships with Lowe's, Home Depot, and those places as well. But
It's located
let me see
across
what I can find out.
the- No appliances.
Yep. And we do have some out of state participating retailers as well. I think in New Hampshire there are a couple, but I am happy to get that list for you. Are there any other questions?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Yep. I wanted to share one other example on sort of a small business side. This is a local Montpelier business actually that we engaged with following the floods of 2023 to really help them install new equipment and appliances through our flood recovery programs. But translation and language access can actually be another barrier. Again, totally outside of any consideration of energy burden. That's an important factor to consider when we're talking about helping customers access our programs. And in the course of serving this particular customer, we realized that the translation service we had been using for our various rebate forms and the resources that we had available for some of our in-field staff who were working directly with customers were not meeting the mark. And so we've subsequently really reinvested in taking a more robust approach there and having translation or having interpretation services available via video chat for all of our in-field staff as they're engaging with customers, and also really making sure that we're applying that to all of our forms, all of our processes, so that these customers have the ability to access our programs. And that service actually works for 300 different languages. So again, just another aspect of kind of equity and accessibility that is not captured if you think just through the lens of energy burden. And that is my final slide. I'm happy to take other questions if there are any.
Yeah, Kelly, I have one other question, which is actually related to, I think it's like the second slide in your slide deck in general. It's got the sort of like the pie chart.
Yep. Do you want me to go back to it?
Sure, yeah, just so we can.
Just don't get dizzy as I go through these slides. Here we go.
No worries. Oh, and sorry, but prior to that, it's, I know that is a pie chart, but it's the one that shows the different, yeah, there's an empty circle here. When I think about, I mean, my understanding of this circle is that this is sort of the distribution of how Efficiency Vermont's performance is measured. Is that accurate?
Correct. These would be the sort of 7 factors that we are measured against, where we have to sort of perform against specific targets set by regulators in order to to achieve the performance requirements that they're setting for us. And so you can see the relative size of each of these parts of the chart reflect the relative weighting of those factors we're measured against.
Right. And so things like appliances, that to me speaks to, ways to reduce potentially summer or winter peaks, or perhaps megawatt hour reduction, that kind of thing. But for the cold climate heat pumps, that what I imagine that falls under the greenhouse gas reduction category.
For Efficiency Vermont, it doesn't actually.
Okay.
The way that we operate that program, the statewide program I referenced before, Efficiency Vermont pays an incentive, a point of sale. We claim the electric reduction because we only put that on the most efficient cold climate models. So, where the amount of savings that we get to claim towards our electric performance requirements is sort of like, what's a baseline model? And then, how are the models that we're supporting performing against that
in terms of electricity? Relative to like the least efficient.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, yeah, sort of a baseline. But in that case, we also process rebates for the electric utilities pursuant to their Tier 3 goals under the renewable energy standard. So in that case, they are claiming the thermal offset, the fuel switch. I will
Okay.
just note, that program has been around for several years. At the outset, it was a partnership with all of the electric utilities. In the last couple of years, because of the way that their budgets work and their ability to bank credits under Tier 3 compliance, there are a few utilities where they have backed off of participating in this program because they had budgetary constraints they needed to manage to, and they already had sufficient credits. And in those cases, Efficiency Vermont is using some of our thermal budget to claim those fuel offset savings. And we did that because, when you're doing a point of sale program, you're trying to do it statewide. Consistency is really, really important. It's very difficult for a distributor to, when they're selling a heat pump, try to like apply different rebates at point of sale depending on where somebody lives and who their electric utility is. And so, from Efficiency Vermont's perspective, really important to maintain good relationships, good collaboration and consistency with those supply chain partners. So it was important for us to kind of step in and help ensure that that rebate would be consistent across the state. And in those cases, as I said, we're using that to help meet our thermal goals as well.
And so the greenhouse gas reduction portion of this pie is really just, it's a little tricky to tell, but I think it's this bottom left sort of light portion.
It's the top.
It's the top left.
Yeah, it's the lightest wedge there. Yeah,
Okay, okay, so it's even less than I thought, so.
it is weighted at 5%.
Yes.
Whereas the two larger, factors, total resource benefits and megawatt hour reduction, those collectively make up half of this circle. They're each weighted at 25%.
Right.
Greenhouse gas reduction is weighted at 5%.
So what are the two that are the 25% each?
Total resource benefits. So that
Okay.
that's sort of a general calculation of the energy savings on a cost basis, and then megawatt hour reduction. So a reduction in generally electric energy usage overall.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Good background. Any other questions? Okay, super. All right, well, thank you so much, Kelly. Really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through this. Something that I hope we keep in mind as we move forward. So if there's no other questions, then we are gonna adjourn for the day.